and like the interview was like put on YouTube or whatever, I became acutely aware of the fact that when I'm thinking really hard, my eyes, like lashes flutter, like I like blink really rapidly. Y'all probably noticed it, but it's just a weird thing I can't help. And then when I get interviewed and I like have to watch myself, I'm like, oh god. Anyways.
Okay, tell me when you're ready.
Oh, you're recording my absurdities.
Oh dear.
Okay. All right, you ready?
I guess.
Okay,
I have a pulse. All right, so good evening, of course, to you all. All the readings that we had centered, or the person that it stems from, are Derrick A. Bell Jr. So the two key concepts that I will focus on will be the entrance convergence principle and racial realism. And we'll go into it. For the presentation, I will give you an introduction of the founder of CRT, which is critical race theory. Of course, I said by Derrick A. Bell Jr. Then I will talk about the entrance convergence principle, and then racial realism, which was a thesis that he ended up drafting, and then I will go ahead and do a conclusion, and then I'll probably will double back through the presentation to cover some more things a little bit more thorough. So, all right, so I think it was fitting to give you some background information on Derrick A. Bell Jr. He was born November 6th of 1930 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In 1952, he had a bachelor's degree from, Duquesne University in Duquesne. Okay, because I'm like, I see Du and I see K. Okay, Duquesne. Thank you. University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Then in 1957, he received a bachelor's of law from the University of Pittsburgh Law School. And I guess it's fitting for it to be Black History Month that I let you know that he was the only black student of his class during that time frame. And then, of course, in 1969, he was a lecturer at Harvard Law School. Then in 1971, he received tenure from, or at Harvard. Of course, he was the first African-American professor to do so. Then from 1980 to 1985, he was the Dean of Oregon, or at the University of Oregon School of Law. And to back up a little bit, he ended up leaving both positions because he wanted females to be able to have tenure and also be dean, if that makes sense to you. And then what is most influential in his work, as he is an author outside of being a lecturer or also a professor, even though he has passed now, he wrote a book titled Race, Racism, and American Law, and that was in 1973, and that is when he drafted the critical race theory, and of course abbreviated CRT. And then, like I said, he died October 5th of 2011 in New York. So getting into it, his theory for CRT, it was established in 1977, so it's embedded in the view that race, instead of being biologically grounded and natural, is socially constructed, and that race as a socially constructed concept functions as a means to maintain the interest of the white population that constructed it. And if I'm going too fast, let me know. All right. And I'm not yelling at you with all caps. That was the font of the presentation itself. So that means that the white elite of American society have established a classification system that seeks to align people to race, which works to economically, socially, and legally create a divide in this American society that stems to the color of one's skin, which works to implement racial inequality so that the white elite may continue to uphold their power within the power structure of American society. So when we get to the entrance convergence principle and racial realism, according to Bell, he saw racism as an integral, permanent, and indestructible feature of American life due to what he called the entrance convergence dilemma, but that transitions to the entrance convergence principle. However, a contradiction exists when considering his thesis on racial realism, and I will come back to this. We'll also make a note of that if that's something we could further discuss. So when the entrance convergence principle to discuss based on the reading of week 2 by Bell within his article of Brown versus Board of Education and the Entrance Convergence Dilemma, the entrance convergence principle as seen as a standard in which the interest of Black Americans in achieving racial equality will be accommodated only when it converges to the entrance of whites. And if you see it, yes, I do have the citations at the bottom of the screen if you're looking for those. That would be page 22. So when lining that with CRT, the entrance convergence principle agrees that Blacks in American society can achieve racial equality within American society as long as it aligns with the interests of the white elite of American society. And if you notice, I'm trying to also interpret these. This might be different based on your own interpretation, but I interpret it by the principle, and then I take it back to the foundation of CRT. So within our readings, they talked about Brown, or they use it as an example, Brown versus Board of Education. So the entrance convergence principle can be applied to the outcome of the court case of Brown versus Board of Education because Black Americans wanted an end to segregation in hopes to receive an equal education as that of white America and white Americans. So within Brown versus Board of Education for white, and I'm going to break it down for white Americans, and then according to his vocabulary term that he used within the reading, for white Americans, the outcome was in their interest because they could uphold the essence of local control. So according to Bell, local control may result in the maintenance of a status quo that will preserve superior educational opportunities and facilities for whites at the expense of Blacks. And it shows you again where I cited, page 24. So for the outcome of Brown versus Board of Education, this allowed the white American elite of American society to dictate which schools would become segregated first, how they would become segregated, and what would be implemented during the segregation process. So for Black Americans, they saw this as a step forward in the fight against racial inequality for racial equality. When we get to the thesis that he drafted on racial realism, based on the reading of week 4, titled Realism, by him, of course, his thesis was based on the movement for it to be a legal and social mechanism on which Blacks can rely to have their voice and outrage heard. And that was on page 302. Now, when you put this in line with CRT, racial realism gives Black Americans hope in the power structure that is drafted by the white elite of society. This movement allows Black Americans a voice as they can express themselves legally and socially to achieve racial equality, as long as this achievement occurs within the white elite power structure that aligns with the interests of the white elite of American society. So within our reading, he gave us an excerpt, or he highlighted Miss Fiona McDonald, and that is on page 308. In 1965, of course, she lived in harmony along the Mississippi Delta. She had strength and courage while being empowered to fight the white elite power structure of American society. She was determined not to be discouraged or defeated by the structure of their imposed system of oppression. She was defiant, as she stated to Bell, I am an old woman. I live to harass white folks. So the outcome of Miss Fiona McDonald, for this reason, she was triumphant, and that was on page 308. But why? And I'll come back to that. So it says conclusion, but I'm concluding the PowerPoint, yes, but not discussion. As there were many terms that were addressed in the two readings, I made a conscious decision to focus on the founder of CRT, Derrick A. Bell Jr., and of the two key concepts, the entrance convergence principle and racial realism, that were addressed within the readings, while providing, of course, Dr. Reed and my peers with examples of these two concepts that stem from the readings, such as that of Brown versus Board of Education and Miss Fiona McDonald, while connecting these examples to the key concepts and to the alignment of CRT. Now let me back up to, go back to Ms. Fiona. So I asked, or I posed in general a question of why she was triumphant. So by my own interpretation, when I thought about, and you all could probably think about it as well, agree or disagree as we discuss later, but based on the thesis of racial realism and the concept of CRT, she was triumphant because she was an old black woman who had hope for the achievement of racial equality in a legal and social system that was structured by the white elite of society. She prevailed because within their structured system of oppression, she worked within their interest while remaining steadfast within the fight of racial equality. So when you think about her being steadfast, and when you break down that, she was firm in purpose, she was faithful to the cause or to the movement, and she established a position. So when you think about her being old, that means set in ways, of course labeled, and as we talked about earlier within society, the label of black for her race was placed upon her. But being a woman within society, she was already oppressed, or within the American society, she was already oppressed. And when I think about it, and Dr. Rita, of course, says bring things current, or try to work to bring things current. Of course, I thought about Beyonce, her Lemonade album, the visual album. And in that, which I didn't know where the quote came from until I did further research later, of the song Don't Hurt Yourself, it was a quote from Malcolm X that she uses on the visual album. I don't know if it's on the CD itself, but I know when I watched it visually, it says, and she used it for Malcolm X within his voice, the most disrespected person in America is the black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the black woman. So when you think about that utterance and you apply it to Miss Fiona McDonald, she was triumphant, and when you think about the principles of racial realism and within CRT, again, because or when you think about her quote when she says, I live to harass white folks, if you think about the statement of her being at the, I would say, I guess, the bottom of the totem pole in society, she's basically being a thorn to the white elite within society because she is remaining steadfast within her position, within society, within their structure, but at the same time, while fighting for racial equality, it's like, I'm trying to figure out the words to how to unpack it and put it in the best perspective. It's to the point that while she is within her, or aligning with her interests, she's also keeping true to her interest within their power structure. Is that clear? Am I saying that clear for you? Okay. And then I will go back to when I said there's a contradiction or controversy within these two principles. A contradiction. Okay, and also Dr. Rita sent me some reading material in regards to this, but I'll try to simplify the two terms when you look at them together. So for the entrance convergence principle, everything was okay for the white elites within society as long as the blacks or the black Americans were in line with their interest. When you look at racial realism, basically it's saying that black America has a voice. So the contradiction lies in black America has a voice, but within racial realism, are their interests, well, black America's interests, aligning with the interests of the white elites. So when you look at this and you probably apply it to our class discussions, the entrance convergence principle probably would align with the white supremacists that we kind of spoke about. The racial realism aspect will probably align with the Black Panther Party aspect of the two things that we probably initiated within class within our discussions. And I guess I would say this because racial realism is like, hold on one second, is when blacks have a voice and basically to be heard. When you go to the entrance convergence principle, then this is when the interests must align with the white elite within society. So I don't know if I'm making that clear for you. Within our within the reading, so within additional, or to break down the definition more further for another article, like I said, that Dr. Reed had given me, for the entrance convergence principle, before I go back to the contradiction, I'll actually tell you that both of them promote racial justice, or they work to provide racial justice. They actually are working, or two concepts that are working within society to make more of a creative solution to help blacks within society counter what has been displaced upon them of the oppressed system, when you look at them both together. Is that my time?
Yeah, what's your time? But
Okay.
you can, I didn't stop other folks, so you can keep
Okay.
going until you're done.
No, that was fine. That was fine. I'm fine. Yes. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
All right.